The first time I said no, really said it, to someone who expected a yes, without an explanation, without an apology, without someone immediately softening it into something more palatable, my hands were shaking. Not because anything dramatic happened. The sky did not fall. Nobody screamed. There was no scene. There was just a silence. And in that silence, every piece of conditioning I had absorbed since childhood rose up simultaneously and told me I had done something deeply, unforgivably wrong. I felt cruel. I felt selfish. I felt like I had broken a rule so fundamental that I couldn't even name it. I just knew in my body, in my chest, in the place where Caribbean girl training lives, that I had stepped out of line, that I was the problem, that a good woman, a loving woman, a generous woman, she would have found a way to say yes. And I sat with that feeling for days, actually, replaying it, wondering if I had been too harsh, too rigid, too, there's that word again, too much. And then slowly, over time, something else emerged underneath the guilt. Something quieter, but steadier. A kind of exhale I hadn't known I had been holding. A small, unfamiliar sense of, I don't know. Integrity, maybe. Like I had finally told the truth about something. Like I had finally been just briefly on my own side. That boundary saved something in me. I didn't know it yet, but it did. Welcome to Unapologetically Us. Real talk, no apologies. I'm Neeka, and today we're talking about boundaries. What they actually are. Why they feel so wrong when we've been raised to believe they're selfish. What happens to the relationships that can't hold them. And why the no that shakes your hands is still absolutely a no. I want to start by clearing something up. Because I think the word boundary has been so thoroughly absorbed into therapy language and Instagram captions that it's lost some of its meaning. People hear it and they think wall. They think cold. They think the difficult person who has a list of rules and cuts people over minor infractions. That is not what a boundary is. That is a wound wearing the language of a boundary. A boundary, at its most basic, is information. It is you telling another person, and more importantly, telling yourself what you are and are not available for, what you can hold and what you cannot, what is okay and what is not okay. It is not a punishment. It is not a rejection. It is not a declaration of war. It is just the truth of your limits. And every human being has them. The difference is that some people were given the permission to name them, and some of us were not. We were not. Let's be very specific about that. The women listening to this show, Caribbean women, Black women, women raised in cultures of obligation and sacrifice and collective need over individual need, we were not given permission to have limits. We were taught explicitly and implicitly that our availability was love, that our yes was loyalty, that our no was betrayal. So we said yes, again and again, past the point of want, past the point of capacity, past the point of where yes was even honest anymore. We said yes because it was safer. Because the alternative, the no, the limit, the truth, carried a cost we had learned early we could not afford. Here's what I want to offer as a reframe. Boundary is not the opposite of love. A boundary is often the condition that makes love possible. Because love without limits is not love. It is a self-erasure dressed up as devotion. It is resentment waiting to become something uglier. It is a yes that stops meaning anything because it was never freely given. A real yes, a generous, wholehearted, I actually want to say yes, is only possible from someone who has the freedom to say no. Take away the no, and you have taken away the integrity of the yes. What's left is just compliance. And compliance is not love. It is just the absence of a safe enough no. Let me go where this really lives. Because we can talk about boundaries in the abstract all day. But the place where it gets complicated, where the guilt is the thickest, where the stakes feel highest, is family. And for Caribbean women specifically, that is a conversation with particular texture. In a lot of the families and communities we come from, there's a value system built on collectivism, on the family unit as the primary loyalty, on elders as authorities whose requests are not really requests, on the idea that children, even adult children, owe their parents a particular kind of deference that does not expire, on the woman as the one who keeps the peace, absorbs the difficulty, smooths the edges, makes herself available. And within that system, a no, especially a no to a parent, a no to an elder, a no to family, it's not just a preference. It is a statement. It is read as disrespect, as ingratitude, as you think you're better than us, as the outside world has changed you, as you have forgotten where you came from. That weight is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. I'm not going to tell you that setting a family boundary is easy or clean, or that everyone will eventually come around and appreciate you for it. Some will, some won't. Some will hold it against you for longer than it feels fair. What I will tell you is this: the pain of holding a boundary is limited. Pain of not holding it, of continuing to say yes past the point of an honest yes, that pain compounds. It becomes resentment. It becomes physical. It becomes the slow erosion of a self that was already fighting to exist. I had to learn, and this took time, the difference between honoring my family and making myself a sacrifice for them. Those are not the same thing. I can love the people who raised me. I can hold deep respect for where I come from. I can be present and generous and committed to those relationships and still have lines. Still have things I will not do, things I will not accept, conversations I will not keep having, versions of myself I will not keep performing to keep the peace. You can love your family and still have boundaries with them. Those are not mutually exclusive. Anyone who tells you otherwise is asking you to choose between love and selfhood. That is not a fair choice. That is not a choice anyone should have to make. And I want to name the punishment, because it happens. When you set a boundary, particularly in family, particularly in communities where your availability was assumed, sometimes there's punishment, silence, withdrawal of warmth, being talked about, being positioned as the difficult one, the changed one, the one who thinks she's too good now. That punishment is designed to make you return to the shape they were comfortable with. It is discomfort dressed up as a consequence. And I want you to know, the punishment is not proof that you were wrong. It is proof that the boundary worked. It changed something. And change, in systems that relied on your compliance, will always create friction before it creates freedom. I want to talk about boundaries in romantic relationships, because I think this is where the confusion runs deepest. Because love is supposed to be limitless, right? Love is supposed to mean you give everything, hold nothing back, make yourself fully available to another person. And that idea is beautiful, and it is also how people get lost inside of love, how they disappear into relationships and emerge years later, not knowing who they are anymore, outside of what the person needed them to be. Loving someone and needing limits with them are not in contradiction. You can love someone deeply and still have things that are non-negotiable for you, still have a self that exists outside of them, still have needs that matter and truths that need to be spoken, and lines that, when crossed, you're willing to name it. In fact, and this is the thing I had to learn the hard way, a relationship without limits is not intimacy. It is enmeshment. It is two people so entangled that neither can move without pulling on the other. And enmeshment feels like love when you're in it. It has all the intensity, all the closeness, all the we are everything to each other energy that gets mistaken for depth. But it is not depth. It is a lack of differentiation. And it is exhausting and unsustainable. And it produces the kind of relationship where you can no longer tell whose feelings are whose. Real intimacy, the kind that lasts, the kind that actually feeds you, requires two whole people. People with edges, with selves, with the ability to say, this is okay for me, and this is not. And to have that respected, and to respect it in return. If someone leaves you because you had a boundary, if the relationship could not survive you having a need, a limit, a truth, then the relationship was contingent on your compliance. And a love that is contingent on your compliance is not love. It is a performance contract. And you were never meant to perform forever. Here is something I want you to hold on to. Your body knew before your mind did. Every boundary violation, every moment someone crossed a line, took more than you offered, required something of you that didn't feel right, your body registered it before you had a language for it, before you could name it or justify it or explain it in a way someone else would accept. There was a tightening, a heaviness, a feeling in the stomach that something was off, a tiredness that appeared specifically around certain people, certain conversations, certain requests, a tiredness that was different from regular tired, more like a deflation, like something had been taken. That was your nervous system telling you the truth before your mind stepped in with all the qualifications. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I'm the problem. Your body already had the answer. Learning to set boundaries is in part learning to listen to that signal again. To trust it before you have the full argument assembled. To say, I notice that this doesn't feel okay. And that noticing is enough to begin with. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to convince anyone. I don't have to wait until it's intolerable enough to justify my discomfort. I felt it. That is enough. Women who were raised to dismiss their own signals, who were taught that their discomfort was an overreaction, their no was selfishness, their instincts were dramatic, those women learn over time not to hear themselves. The body keeps sending the signal, they just stop receiving it. Part of healing, part of what we are doing in this show, in this season is relearning to receive your own signal, to let your body's truth arrive before you edit it into something more acceptable. To trust that the tightening, the heaviness, the particular tiredness is real, is information, is yours. Here's what I'm still working on. I'm still learning to hold a boundary without over-explaining it, without building a case so airtight that no one could possibly find fault with it, without preempting every objection, softening every edge, apologizing for the inconvenience of having a limit at all. I know where that comes from. In the environments where I learned to navigate, a no without an explanation was dangerous. A limit without justification was rude. So I learned to package every boundary in so much context and qualifications that by the time I finished explaining it, it barely looked like a boundary at all. More like a very polite request that you might want to consider if it's not too much trouble. I'm learning that a boundary does not require a defense. No is a complete sentence. That doesn't work for me does not need a footnote. I do not need to submit evidence before I'm allowed to protect my own peace. That is still uncomfortable. The urge to explain is strong, but I'm practicing. Every over-explained no is one step closer to a clean one. I'm also still sitting with the grief of some relationships that revealed themselves clearly when I started having limits. Relationships I thought were solid that turned out to be conditional. Conditional on my availability, my compliance, my willingness to absorb whatever was brought to me without naming it as too much. Those losses are real. Even when the relationship needed to change, even when I am certain I made the right call, the grief doesn't care about the logic. It just knows something is gone. And I'm learning to let both things be true. The rightness of the boundary and the sadness of the cost. Your invitation this week is not to set a huge, scary boundary. I'm not sending you into the most difficult relationship in your life to have the conversation you've been avoiding for 3 years. That's not this week's homework. This week, I want you to notice one moment where your body sends you the signal, the tightening, the heaviness, the specific tiredness that appears around a particular person or request or situation. And instead of immediately overriding it, instead of the usual, I'm probably being too sensitive, I want you to pause and say to yourself, my body is telling me something. You don't have to act on it yet. You don't have to say anything to anyone. Just receive the signal. Just let it be information rather than something to immediately dismiss or manage. Because every boundary starts there. Not with the perfect words, or the rehearsed speech, or the right moment. It starts with a woman who decided to stop talking herself out of what she already knew. Start there. That's enough for this week. That's episode 5 of Unapologetically Us. Real talk, no apologies. If this episode gave language to something you've been feeling without words for, share it. Pass it to the woman in your life who keeps saying yes past the point of honesty. She needs to know that the no she's been swallowing is not rudeness. It is self-respect waiting to be claimed. Come find me on YouTube, Spotify, and all socials. Links will be in the description. Tell me about your first no. Tell me what it cost and what it gave back. I want to hear all of it. Next week, we go somewhere that I think a lot of you've been quietly sitting with. Outgrowing people is grief. Because nobody tells you that healing comes with losses. That when you change, not everyone comes with you. And that grieving a living person, someone who is still there but no longer fits, is one of the loneliest and most necessary things you can do. That conversation is next week. It's going to be tender. Until then, trust what your body already knows. It's been trying to tell you the truth for a long time. It's time to start listening. I'm Neeka, and this is Unapologetically Us. Real talk, no apologies. I'll see you next week.